Dana's art.
Yeah, we heard. No, it wasn't, but I mean, what I caused them loose? 2 planes, they had hundreds. I'm going to pick up a little more of what I've been talking about and see if perhaps if I flesh it out a little bit that you can put it together in your own way and make some use out of it. Since I'd already used the term pointing out that all of the states of enlightenment and expanded consciousness, liberation of mind, etc., as I described it already, is the stopping of thought. Now, that is pretty abrupt and brutal to say stopping of thought. So now that most people has heard the term and had a little while to digest it and argue with it, and now let me back off of the the brutal approach. See, to say stopping of thought, even though I made some additional comment myself, if you recall me saying that an ordinary mind would probably ask, well, do you mean you're unconscious? And I said, no, and etc. And there's really nowhere to go with it after that to the ordinary mind. So let's refine it a bit, shave off some of the abrupt edges to it, and call it the suspension of thought. That does not mean there's no validity to me saying stopping of thought, but I did that for sort of shock value and so that we could pull back to a more, shall we say, reasonably comfortable mental position after you had once been hit with the idea of stopping of thought. It is in a sense, it is actually better to refer to it as suspension of thought. Suspension being, as you know, like a postponement, a deferment. Because it was actually misleading if I said that a greater state of consciousness or the brain activated to another level would be that thought stopped. Even that's misleading. If you say, well, is it stopped forever? No. Is it stopped 90% of the time forever? It's really, in a sense, misleading to call it stopping of thought. Although it's not misleading for me to say what I said. Consider it the suspension of thought. Now, what would that bring about in a man's life if you were able to do that? Whenever you suspend thought, you have ceased to be in any sort of confrontational relationship to life. Unless you are in physical combat with another person, you have stopped any personal aggression, any personal conflict on an individual level. And also, as I pointed out, all of the man's so-called psychological problems at that moment, or for the moments that you could suspend thought, would be treated to such a degree that it would damn near resemble a cure. It would stop all psychological flaws in any individual by their own definition, whatever they describe themselves as being, fearful, too aggressive, too greedy. It would halt all of that, the suspension of thought. I was going to point out a kind of method. The method, again, is old. The mystical path itself does not change, simply the names change. The descriptions change. But since everyone likes glib, pithy, and the one I had in mind was even illiterate, you could take an approach such as this. The 3 S's of smile, suspend, and scan. The smiling part does not even have to actually be external. It could be. But the smiling actually represents a shift in the nervous system up around, as the neurologists like to call it, the limbic area. It is just an attempt right that second. I'm not going to explain this to death, but it would be like an extension of the kind of mystical warrior that people have dreamed of. It would be an active mystical approach. Let us say you just walk out the door in the morning, or you walk into a new environment, you walk into a new office, a new business. Smile, suspend thought, and scan. And even the scan would not necessarily mean you had to go. You could. It does not preclude it in the same way I said that you do not actually have to smile externally, but you certainly can. But what it is relieving a certain kind of collective common weight of which most people are not aware, that does lay upon the individual human nervous system, which is, if you begin to see it, why I've spent a good part of the last several years making jokes and kicking around the word serious. Solemn might be a better word since I've misused serious so much. It is taking what goes on in life to be of some individual consequence, which it is not, and which you cannot tell anyone, and which any ordinary sane person will deny, as they should, because it's just ridiculous. Since a part of being human and being conscious is to believe that you should and can struggle with the environment. And so to tell an ordinary mind that there is nothing going on in life that's of any individual significance to them it would be charitable to call it ridiculous. Because to the ordinary mind it is. But may I also refresh you, that I'm going to bring up again, that I point out to you that the energy running what appears to be ordinary life out here, and let's speak above the physical bio-survival level. It's true down there, obviously. But right now we're speaking at the level of human consciousness, there and above. That the energy running all that, the affairs of man, is the same energy running each individual's perception of it, their consciousness, their thoughts. So to tell them that what they perceive in life, if someone started talking about, I don't know what's going to happen to this country with the kind of political agendas we have now being put forward by conservatives or liberals. I don't know what's going to happen to this country if we keep operating at a fiscal deficit. Whatever they say. And if you tried to tell a man, if you said, by the way, I heard an idea that said that what happens out in life is of no individual significance. Now, I don't have to go much further. As you realize, from an ordinary view, that's just silly. They couldn't believe that an apparently literate verbal man would say something like that. Because it's obviously not true. The man says, well, it's certainly true. For instance, the government operating at a deficit not only is affecting me and taking money out of my pocket, they like pointing out it is mortgaging the future of our children. And you just see future genes down in your body going, I'll come back and get you for this. I say that was a little humor, but I guess I overdid it. But it is of no significance, and all you have to do is be able to suspend thought. You've got to have, as always, of course, the intent to do it. You've got to, in some way, have been spurred on to believe that there is some other level of consciousness, some other state of awareness, and that this might be one way to go about it. In other words, just people suspend thought. Thought stops. That's part of the difference, the little interim, the segue between people going. It was like the firing between the major pathways, major neural pathways. But people's the suspension of thought is not anything unusual. It is just not in an ordinary man's awareness, and even if it were, if I could make a man believe it, or if I said, well, I've got certain kinds of supernatural PET scan x-rays, and I can show you over a sequence that the brain, that there are lapses between it firing, that in a sense you're unconscious every few seconds, that you're just momentarily unconscious. I could even get people to say, well, that could be true. Now that I said it, hell, it might be true. I meant literally. You mean you were guessing? I'm not saying. At any rate, see, even you realize that you could get an ordinary person would probably go, well, that sounds all right. I can live with that. That might be true. But then they don't see any significance to it. So the point is, you've got to have the intent. You've got to be on this great mystical quest to be able to do anything with this kind of information. You mean real secret and weird information? No, real crude and blunt information. Now, weird and spooky and metaphysical information, even ordinary people get something out of that. They love it. They buy the books. No, it's not that. But if you do not suspend thought yourself, then the thing is, the energy running life out there is, of course, the same energy that is running our great government. So to say our government in some way, fiscally, is doing me harm, there's no difference between you and the government. Or if you say the morality of our civilization is breaking down at such an unprecedented degree that I fear for the actual survival of our culture, of our nation. Well, you can fear all you want to. But there is no difference between what you're perceiving. It's the same energy running what the mind perceives through ordinary thought and the thought itself. And all you've got to do is suspend from it, and it's no theory, there's nothing to discuss. You suddenly realize you could be staying right there listening to the president speak, the head of the Federal Reserve System, the world's most famous economist, or economist, according to where you're from. And he could be rattling sabers, hollering out that Chicken Little's about to fall on everyone's head. And you could be, let's say from years past, you've been the sort that believed that the government was going to ruin us all and was trying to slip in more, all kinds of conspiratorial fears. But if you can suspend thought, there is no theory. Let's say that you're staying right there listening to him speak or watching him on TV and all involved with it, leaning over and going, no, punching people. You're like, look at that crap. Look at it. And all you got to do is suspend thought. Not only does thought stop in you, not perception, but that kind of thought stops, and then everything out there that was stimulating your thought just collapses or is suspended. Maybe I should leave it at that for the time being. In other words, right then, it's not verbal, but you no longer find any significance in what that is. And the better you get at it, to where you get to where you have your own perception of life at a non-thought level, then you do understand verbal if you had to. But in other words, you do understand it's not just a blank space. But you do understand that what the government goes on, the government could finally collapse. If we're going to use government for a while, all governments have collapsed. You know, life is like, I hate to tell you this, but you know that. It's kind of like in everybody's life. There's ups and downs and ups and downs. Not ups and downs. We're not talking about a racetrack. But there things go, you know, this way and that. And so the government could collapse. Without any doubt, sooner or later, this great country of ours, I mean, as much as we all love Albania, sooner or later we'll fall from our pinnacle of world leadership, maybe not in our lifetime, but I assure you if we come back 200 years from now, 500 years from now, or 1,000 years from now, Albania will be like the last place that they call upon for cultural leadership, send in troops for the UN. We would just be, that's just the way it goes. Well, as everyone knows, they normally point to the Roman Empire, you know, the rise and the fall. The rulers of all the known Western world, and they just collapsed. So, we can say that our government will eventually collapse. But you understand that it has no significance to you. And I can't stay here. There's nothing else I can say about it because it's insane. It's obviously not true if you think about it. But if you don't think about it, it's just blunt as a hammer. if you suspend thought, my little 3 S's I was going to say, smile, suspend, and scan. The only time you can scan the kinds of things that in the past I've talked about, I've encouraged people, is a little test or something to do, is not stare. That you really got no business staring. And it can be interesting for a while to literally try not to stare. Of course, you're really good, it could be interesting for a long while. But most people just get interested for a day or two or a couple of weeks and they go, that's the damnedest thing I've ever done. Really? No, it is. Really, it has been a lot for me. I'm glad that you said that because I never realized how people stare and like that. In other words, saying the Lord's Prayer will wake you up, but not the second time you say it. Because then you think about it. Or doing, if you're a Muslim, you can do the warrior beads, repeat the name of Muhammad 22 times, and you'll reach enlightenment. But normally people can't do it the first time, and then they won't do it a second time, and then it's too late. You understand? You stare. They're just staring with their fingers involved also. Lighting candles if you're a Catholic. To scan, besides physically, I'm not making light of it, since I've encouraged it before, but you'd be better off, everyone in life trying to change their state, is to literally not stare, which also I got to point out to you, just about precludes television, the movies, reading. For those of you that heard me mention one time the spectrum, that if someone knew what they were doing and I gave you, that's a spectrum. From people who are just mildly interested in such as this, and maybe it would listen to someone like me talk about it or read a book about it, then to those who've got some notion of what's going on and are just inflamed, real individual crusaders. They're going to find the Holy Grail no matter what. Now up here, when I said that if you understood that, and if you understood that the whole point, the way to get there, what you're after is the suspension of thought, then anything that interferes with you suspending thought for you personally, you would eschew. You would hate it. You would despise it. And I point out that if you were up here at this extreme, that you would quit watching television, you wouldn't read, you wouldn't go to movies, you wouldn't listen to music, you would cut out almost all external stimuli. And I did not want to leave any sort of impression with anyone that I said that you should or it would be good for you. But I'm telling you, if you knew what you were doing and you were that interested, that's what a man would do. That's what he would do, which is reflected in a crude level, as I point out, of people secluding themselves in monasterial type conditions. But you could live right here in the midst of civilization and you could stop doing all those things. But you understand, if you quit staring, if you literally quit staring, go home and try to watch television and not stare. And if that seems too easy, sit in a chair and turn on the radio and try not to stare. And read a book and try not to stare. At least it'll give you good eye exercise to try to read. But which would be somewhat indicative of what I would suggest a true mystical knight on the quest would do, because you can't stare. The Fisher King sends you out on that great quest. Nobody knows what you're looking for. Don't know where it is. You sure as hell, if you were trying to operate at optimum efficiency, you would not stare. You ride out across the moat. You're away from the castle. You're now on the great quest. You don't know what the quest is. You don't know what you're looking for, so you don't know where it is. If there's anything you don't need to be doing, is what? Staring. You should be constantly, scanning, surveying what's going on, because you've got no idea when it might pop up. A hint, a secret, the Grail itself. Staring's not going to do you any good. Now, ordinary people that normally end up thinking they're on this kind of quest, they get detailed instructions. They will insist on nothing any less. And as long as you got instructions and a map, by God, you got to stare. You can ride for a while, get up. Nothing happens, so you stop your horse or your Firebird or whatever you're driving, and you pull out your map and you go, It's north. So you can stare. But if you got no map, it helps diminish, won't necessarily stop, but it gives you a greater opportunity not to stare. You're riding out naked, you and the horse. No TV, no radio, no intercom, no fax machine, no cellular phone, and no map. And if you understand that at all, then you understand you've got no business staring. There is nothing at which to stare. Above all instances, that should be the time that a man was not staring, that if you were actually out there actively. If you take my little mythical picture of this knight, actually out on a great quest, seeking this grail, and no one knows what it is, seeking the cure, seeking the redemption, seeking the new health of the king. And the king doesn't know what's wrong with him. Of course, the king being your own nervous system. And it sends you out. Help me. I'm a brave knight. I'll do it. I'm at your service, my liege. I am off. Can you tell me what it is? The king goes, oh. Just, would you help? If I don't get some help, you're the only person I have. If you do not help, if you cannot assist me, I fear that my end is near. You go, I'm off. But what business would you have staring after that? But if, to take that myth, to roll it out a little bit, if the king had weakened, and the knight says, I'll do anything for you, my liege, but give me some hint. I mean, what is the thing? What is it? How do you feel? I just don't feel good. Well, I don't know what to look for. Am I looking for an herb? Am I looking for some tree bark? Am I looking for some sort of medicine? Am I looking for some physical splint? I mean, can you tell me more? The king says no. But what if he had said, oh, all right. And he'd give him any little piece of direct information. It's like a scrap of a map. And then every time you're out riding around, and here it is, been months, been years, and you're riding the world. Remember, off on this great quest, and you don't know what it is. It's of super importance. It's the only thing that may save your liege, that may save your own king, that may save your own ass. And you're out there riding, a brave, upright, intelligent, alert knight. But if you got a scrap, then now you're riding around, you still don't know exactly what you're looking for, but periodically. Because staring is a great comfort to people. Staring is what you do in the daytime when you can't actually lay down and go to bed. And so to help staring, this is like a sleeping pill, like some hot cocoa. You pull out the one scrap of the map you got, whatever the little thing the king actually told you that, well, I think it's so-and-so, or it resembles so-and-so, all right, at least I think it's north of here. Then every now and then you can pull it out, and you can stare, and you take a short nap. But again, notice, assuming you're following this, how ridiculous that is from an ordinary view, because the ordinary mind says, well, that is silly. Because I'm speaking for an ordinary person. They would say, to use your own description, that would show a conscientious knight. Because at least the one piece of information he had, he only has one piece, he would obviously periodically pull it out, and he would look at it. He would concentrate on it. He would reflect upon it. Notice he didn't say stare at it. But that's concentration. Not just looking at your hand, but assuming that was a piece of information, a map. Instructions from the king, a hint from a king. And you look, If you do not suspend thought in you, if you do not suspend thought, then the thoughts that are life out there will drag you along forever. And you'll not know where you're going. And to say that you have some plan in some transcendental sense is sort of pathetic. It is inoperable. Because if you do not suspend thought, thought will drag you along with them. And it doesn't matter what thought. Because once you understand that the energy out there running life, it appears to show up differently in people, that everyone seems to have slightly different opinions, different attitudes, different thoughts. But it's not their thoughts. It is just a piece of the great thoughts, the great river that's running through here. And if you do not suspend yourself from those thoughts, the thoughts will drag you to the grave. They drag you from the time you said, Daddy, Mama, to the time you go, oh my God, I'm dying. From there to there, from the cradle to the grave, you're being drugged. And there's no way to prove it. In fact, ordinary people, it's not even true. You know, it's nobody, well, I'm not about to write a book or put out a public handbill or try to convince people that by God, your thoughts are going to drag you around forever and it doesn't mean anything to you individually. It can't be proven. It's not even correct to an ordinary person. But if you suspend yourself from the thought, it is glaringly obvious. And if you do not suspend yourself from thoughts, put it to you another way, since I've kicked around the idea of entertainment, in the fullest sense of entertainment, of stimuli, if you do not suspend thought, if that's not your continual attempt as you're riding along, you're not searching for a scrap of information, you're not trying to you're not trying to imagine that some of these signs, if you're just trying to suspend thought as you're riding out on the quest, if you don't do that, then the thoughts out in life will stimulate your mind, your thoughts. That will be what entertains you. There's only two choices. With almost everyone on this planet, there's only one choice, and that's what they are. Not just genetically, physically, but what they are here, what they think. If you do not suspend thoughts, then the thoughts that are out there, the common thought, is what will entertain you. That's what will stimulate you. That's what you react to. Again, it is subtle and impossible for an ordinary person to see, in the same sense that they cannot see that what's going on in life is of no individual significance, when it obviously is. If this government goes bankrupt, I'll go bankrupt. It'll hurt me financially. If morality keeps crumbling, it'll be less and less safe for me to go out in the street. Yeah. Well, it's true. It's serious. Yeah, I know. As hard as that is to see, another one I brought up several times, it's real blunt and obvious, but I know sometimes it gets tricky to see when I put it in words. Your mind is not your own. Your thoughts are not your own. They're just an offshoot of the thoughts out there, the energy out there. And an individual mind will say that's not true. And it will take the very things I've already said and use it as ammunition. If I was trying to convince an ordinary person of this, they would go, well, wait a minute. My thoughts, whatever the hell you mean, my thoughts are mine. They may not be correct. I'm not the most intelligent man in the world, but my thoughts are mine. I know they're mine. And you know how I know they're mine? Okay, how? Because they differ, like from my brother. All right, I'm a Republican. I'm a free market economist type guy, and my brother is as liberal as they come. He believes in more and more government control, especially in the fiscal area and in the distribution of wealth. My thoughts are different than his. But you understand, his thoughts are nothing but they're being dragged along by what's going on out there. Don't get stuck with the example. I've tried to do it in wider theory before, or wider detailing. It's that if you're thinking about what everybody else is thinking about, now forget whether you agree or not, if you're just thinking about what everybody else is thinking about, you're asleep. You're imprisoned. You're not thinking. You're not conscious. And it doesn't matter. The ordinary mind wouldn't go that far if they even heard that, because they go, wait a minute. You cannot make that kind of blanket statement because you do not know what I think. And you obviously don't know what everyone in the world thinks. So you cannot say that you should not be thinking about what everybody else is thinking about. It's important stuff. Yeah. It is so blunt, it is so obvious, and as he just accused me, it is so all-covering. He called it blanket. It is so all-covering. Maybe I'm still not making it obvious enough as I could. Anything that ordinary people talk about is just bullshit. And I just do that for shock value, and I guess the shock value is gone. It's not bullshit in the sense that they're wrong. It's just bullshit. It's not that, wait a minute. You mean I shouldn't agree with them? No. You shouldn't even be thinking about it. Yeah, but it's important stuff. It's my future. Yeah, I know. It's my pocketbook. It's my freedom, my political freedom. Yeah. It's what will happen to my children and my grandchildren. Yeah. And you can't do anything with it. It's not that they're stupid. They could stand there and say, well, listen, I'm trying to consider what you're saying, but it makes no sense. I mean, it's just, obviously, it's patently incorrect. If you're serious in what you're saying, it's not true, and it is true. If I'm giving a fair description that a state of being more conscious is where thought is suspended, just let's assume for the sake of a joke that I'm giving you a fair description. So if there you are and you're conscious, but you're conscious without the support of thought. Now remember, we're not putting any qualifications on thought. We're not saying, well, your kind of thought, or maybe all thought is just suspended. And you're conscious. If that is a higher state of consciousness, then what does that tell you about everything that you ever thought? If I'm correct in the first matter, which I am. But just assume that maybe I am, just for the sake of a conversation. Everything that people think about is bullshit. To them, it's very important. It is very important to the maintenance of life. Insofar as someone attempting to do the one thing that you can do in life, the one thing that man does that no other creature does, the one thing is he wants to change. If you are actually involved with the attempt to change, not change behavior, not change one opinion for another, but the thing always referred to as enlightenment or an awakening of consciousness, an expansion of consciousness. You cannot do it by thinking about what everyone else thinks about. And there are no conditions. There are no asterisks to it. There are no footnotes to it. It's just... And it's only through that, since you can't convince anybody, since you cannot prove it, since it's irrational and illogical on its face, it is only by the experience of it. Then it's nonverbal. But enough of you, I keep pressing on, enough of you have had extended periods of this. It's just that nothing then, probably the easiest way, is nothing is wrong with life. You get in a prolonged state of being able to suspend thought. You might have one leg, bad skin, your hair falling out, gum disease. In other words, all the signs of being human and maybe dying. Broke, your car just blew a gasket, out of all that. And at that time, there is, I even hate to say it, but I've already said it, there is simply nothing amiss in life. If we will assume that such a guy as Buddha existed, he gave it a good shot to try and describe it. Except he started at the other end. If you remember his opening statements after he reached the state and then decided to try to tell the others, he started the opposite way, that all of life is suffering. And all those monks went, yeah. And then he kind of, brought them along. Like, all right, all of life is suffering, but I figured out why, and how to get out. I went, okay, all right, how? But see, he started at that end. But what he drug them to, if they had metaphorically and then into literally followed his verbal detailing of, all of the noble truths, and that man is born suffering, here's what causes suffering, here's how to get out of it. If they'd gone that far, they would simply be to the place I'm just put you in point blank. That you realize, wait a minute, everything's just right. You would never say that because you obviously, at the ordinary view, things are not just right. Because any creature who wants to change, nothing is ever right. And you couldn't turn around to anybody, your mother, father, priest, rabbi, the guy next to you, and go, I just had a mystical experience, finally, one big enough, one long enough, just a bus stop, let's say. You go, I've been working on this all my life, and you're the only guy here, and I have been able to expand this to such a point that it's now turned into something useful. And the guy goes, oh, really? And you go, yeah. And you go, you know what I realized? But so you wouldn't do this because you wouldn't say that everything in life is just right. Because you try and look at him, he's also missing an arm. Over here he's got a couple of fingers cut off and he's scarred. And he's standing there in a bus stop, clutching a dime and a nickel or whatever. And obvious, you're not going to turn to him and go, it just struck me. Now I realize what Buddha and everyone meant. Life is just right. Yeah, right. I mean, you're going to see the guy, he's probably going to decide to walk instead of take a bus. From any ordinary view, it's not true. There's no sense even discussing it. The reality of it, again, is seeped into everyone's nervous system. The religious, especially those leading the religious tangos, attempt to make some bread out of the ungraspable wheat by saying that in some way, to try and respond to their parishioners and their followers saying, well, how come I've been a member here of this church and my business still went broke? My wife died, my child died. How do you explain that? And then they have to wrestle with the fact, but they're always trying to say that God, the great forces, have some perfect picture here that they're working on. And it's just up to us in some way. We've got to pray more, we've got to donate more to the church, we've got to do something. And in some way will put us in a better position, align ourselves like with the gods, and then things will, that life is basically good. Because they got to say that. But they don't know how, they don't know what to say about it. All they can do is say, well, trust, have faith, pray more, do something. But you will not hear anyone in ordinary life, unless they're deranged, to say, you know what, life is just right. No one ever says that. You cannot say that from thought, because there is no thought that a man can have, any thought that is in the mainstream of life. I don't care what it is. But there is no thought in people that says, I just realized everything is just right. Now you could get some clown to have a couple of beers or something and just had a fast fucking bed, new car, and go, you know what, life is good. But behind that sentence is like 24 asterisks and, see below, all kinds of conditions. Because if you ask me what, you mean nothing is wrong with life? And you know it's not true. He's going to say, well, if you're serious, my back still hurts, and you got all kinds of things. It is only through the suspension of thought that one reaches the kind of states that the Buddhas and the Jesuses and Laos and Zoroasters and Muhammad's, it's right at the heart of all of it, except the ordinary mind takes it to be some dream world, some supernatural world, and the only way to make it at all merchandisable here is to say it's not just a dream world, it's just we can't get it in this life, it'll be in the next life. That's not what they said. But that's all, the ordinary mind, that's the only way they can take it. If they try and get the best grip of it and go, well, I'm just sure that's true. Life just can't be as terrible as I think it is, or etc. But they look and they cannot see any justice, they cannot see any balance, they cannot see any equity. They cannot see life as it is on the basis of thought. Because man, being the only creature that wants to change, the only place that he wants to change is here. Your muscles do not want to change, your internal organs do not want to change. The body, as ad hocly described as being separate from the mind, your body has no intention of changing. Your body does not tell you to go lose weight. Unless, you're obese to a point that's affecting your health, but just being a little overweight, it's not your body says, let's go exercise. Your body's never told you to go out and run. Your body never told you to go join a gym. Thought did. Your body never said, I could do better in life if I get a nose job and straighten this out. And it all seems true. There's just obvious examples, and that's obviously ridiculous. If you told a person that their body did not tell them to go lose that 10 pounds they put on since they got married, they go, well, sure, it's my body. It's my body. And if I said, yeah, but your body didn't tell you to go out and jog. Well, yeah, it did. No, it didn't. You cannot see what's going on in life when the ordinary thoughts is the only thing spurring you. It's the only thing entertaining you. Now that's all that's available at the ordinary level. Those attempting to do this have opened up another opportunity. Not magic, not automatic. Ha! But when you suspend thought, and you can do it for some length of time, whatever the hell that means, you can do it for some length of time, then is the only other possibility of you stimulating your own self mentally. That's it. That is the beginning and the end of the book. Without doing that, no matter what you think for the rest of your life, and you can think about what I've said, if you consider what I've said in the past to be of some importance, you can think about that. You can think about anything you ever read, anything you ever heard. You can think about all you want to, and it makes no difference. You mean like a none? Yes. That's the word I was looking for. None. Your mind is being stimulated, as it normally should be, by the normal stimuli that's running out there and running what you perceive to be the world of man. It is only by suspending thought. I can start describing it metaphorically. It's like you get some breathing room. It's almost as though, some of you may have recognized these kind of descriptions. They pop up in druggy material. They pop up in much metaphysical material. It's almost as though you can stop the world. And some of you probably take enough drugs that you even had that sensation. There is some validity to it, the description that is. It's like all this is going on, and it appears to be running at some tempo. It is relative to your own thoughts. You know, that's why it's longer from now until first cocktail after work. It takes longer from now. If it's 1 o'clock, it takes longer from now until 5 o'clock than it does if at 5 o'clock you got to go to the dentist. But still, out there seems to be some sort of tempo. The things seem to be going in a certain way. There's no doubt about it. Of course, if it's going like that, then your consciousness, your thoughts, one way or the other, are reacting to it. You're either running parallel to them, or you could be, when they're in a hill, you're in a trough with it. You could be arguing with them, but if it's going dun 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 dun, then your thoughts are going dun 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 dun. What seems to be the moving reality of life out there is your moving reality. And if you suspend that, it literally, I mean, that's a fair description, it's as though, and again I shouldn't say stop because that's real brutal, it's as though you have suspended the animation of the mental world. Now the cars are still running, people are still walking, but this, it's as though everything sort of went, and you can almost scan it at your leisure. And you will definitely, then you don't have to smile purposefully, because then you realize, well, I'll be down. And when you can stop it like that, again, any question of, is there any significance to what's going on? It's just, there's not. You do understand that all the kinds of descriptions I've used, or some others you may have heard, but it's like a puppet show going on. It's like a bad movie. It's like a movie. You don't know it's bad until you see it. Yeah, but I've been watching all my life. Yeah, but you didn't ever see it. You were in it. You're one of the people that some of you laugh at that sits there in the theater and argues with the screen. What the hell do you think you do? People go, well, I don't do that. But there's always some kind of rowdy people being in a theater nowadays, and they'll holler at somebody, watch out! You know, the vampire's behind you. You know, yeah, that's real dumb and stupid, right? It's one of the benefits of closed environments to the ordinary thought processes, because you can apparently pluck or select yourself as being an exception to what's taking place within the closed environment. When you suspend thought, in one real sense, you suspend what's going on out there. And this is not mystical, it's not hocus pocus, because again, I repeat, the clouds are still moving, the rain's falling down, the earth is turning, people are still moving, cars are going. But this part, it's as though it stopped. And you can see it for what it is. It's all these people, and I'm not making fun of it, as you know, but you look out, and here it is. All these important people, just ordinary people, walking up and down the street, briefcases, suits, ties, bums, the whole human drama. walking right by, and you look at it, and when you have suspended this part, when you have suspended thought, which is suspended what you think is going on out there, it's a bunch of kids. It's a bunch of children dressed up. That doesn't explain it, because it's not something that you can go, you certainly don't laugh at it. It's not silly. It is deadly solemn. Life is serious about that. And it's made the people serious. And you see people, there it goes, there it goes. I just recognize him. That is the head of the Federal Reserve System, with a big briefcase, people trailing after him, all of his sycophants with all the other, they got briefcases, they're on the way to the White House. There goes a famous movie star, there goes a politician, there goes somebody, and they're all looking, and they're staring, doing their job. But when you can suspend this, that, even though they're physically moving, it stops, or is equally suspended. And you simply see it for what it is. It is basically bullshit. It is important bullshit, but it's meaningless. It's required bullshit. But you see it for what it is. And there is no trick to it. There is no way that you can learn to do it. There is nothing to think about to do it. Contraire. It's the suspension of thought just lays it bare. Which I again suggest to you is what Muhammad, when he awoke, went, oy vey. Where have I been? He'd been right there. That's the problem. Well, my little 3 S's. If you consider, it's all tied to what I've been talking about tonight. I just tried to get around from the side and the back of it. Anytime you use that sort of thing, it sounds like a sequence, but it would be like a mystical warrior. It would be like a kind of attitude you'd take that you're out there with no map. Or if you got a map, at least you can't blame much of it on me, because I've done the damnedest to talk as long as I have and not really say anything worth writing down that you could remember that, well, this will help me later. Now I know that people do. People write to me from around the world asking my advice, or they read something I wrote or heard something I said. And I get the kinds of things pretty common about, well, I heard you speak one time in New York or somewhere, and they'll go, and I've been wanting to write you, I wanted to ask a question that night, and I just thought, no, I can't really formulate it. And I have remembered that same night. I remember what you said now. It's been 3 years. And I've just said it over and over. It was so striking when you said it, and they'll repeat something that sounded like I said it. I could have said it. And they said, I've carried around, and now I'm ready to spring the question on you. I understand that that's the way it seems that's important. Not just because it's me, it could be somebody else. But it is not. Anyway, back to the 3 S's. If you were still on the quest, and you were still an honorable knight, nude as possible, stripped, non-staring, and we would hope, with either no map or just the remnants of a map. Hopefully what little you had, you've carried in your pocket. Don't ask me how a nude person has a pocket, but you've carried it in your back pocket, and it's gotten sweaty like a good piece of notebook paper that you wrote down an important phone number. And after a couple of months, couple of years, you take it out, and it's just kind of, at best, maybe that's what you have. But while in that condition, and I'm saying that you ride around a new bend in the road, you can just do it to everyday life, but it makes it easier to describe. Turn to a new bend, you ride into a new land, a new forest, a new clearing. And like any good knight, like any good warrior, you should be alert. But I was going to give you my 3 S's. First off, you should always smile. That should be there first. And that is, internally, is to try and be of good cheer. None of this is in sequence. It all happens at once in the same way. Suspending thought does not make you awake. Does it lead to it? No. Does it not lead to it? No. The effort is the achievement. That much? Well, you mean if you do it that long? How about that long? Well, how about that long? How about as long as it can go? Okay. I'm agreeable. But verbally, everything sounds like it must go in some sequence. But you should be smiling. We can start at the other end. If you suspend thought, you are smiling. Because if you suspend thought, you realize everything's just right. You got no complaint with anyone. You got no complaint with anything. But at any rate, since it's going to sound like it's in sequence anyway, that there you are, trusty night, and you're right around the bend, road you've never been down, new clearing, some other horses, some knights over there, some people. Smile. Suspend thought and scan. Whether literally, physically, or internally. Doesn't matter. And it's not necessarily in that sequence because, as I said, if you can suspend thought, you're going to smile anyway. You may not go. But inside you smile because you've realized everything's just right. There's nothing to frown about. There's nothing to smile about. It's just everything's just right. The scanning fits a little more appropriate into the idea of there being a sequence into my 3 S's because you should not be staring. If you're staring, you can't suspend thought. You cannot be in this condition. And I don't care what. You just heard that your best friend died. You just heard that somebody wrecked your car. You just heard that you may have cancer. Is there a reason in the world to stare? Anybody go, my God. But anytime, whatever the reason. See, reasons don't mean anything. Not to a naked knight. Not to Moses. There's no such thing as a reason. That's why he'd throw them down, they'd turn into snakes and leave the room. Is that it? Anyway, they'd hand him a reason. He'd go, screw a reason. Things that explode and they'd cause plagues on other people. He'd say, you want a reason? He'd throw it to somebody else. And if they'd catch it, hey, it's their fault. It's a mystical reason. And then they'd get boils. Frogs would take over their house. You cannot stare and suspend thought. You cannot be involved with, you cannot stare and suspend thought. If you're staring, you are absolutely tied to the energy running life out there, which is running the thought life of people. It's the same one that's running you, and if you're staring at it, and again, no conditions, don't even bother to say, well, you don't know how I'm staring. It doesn't matter. You can be agreeing with it, arguing with it, sticking your tongue, mad at it, happy with it, but if you're reacting to that, if that energy is what's driving your thought, you cannot, if it's driving your thought, that's the only way you can be staring. Whatever it is, no matter how important it is, you're staring and you cannot suspend thought. That was the original model for the notion of mutually exclusive. You cannot stare and suspend thought. Nor can you, if you're suspending thought, you can't stare at anything. If you can't stare at anything, you cannot take it illusionarily serious. You cannot feel judgmental about it. You cannot be mad at it. It's just bullshit. It's just noise. We never do enough dirty, offensive, and insulting things around here, at least in my humble opinion. So I think tonight, and everybody out in TV land, I think that we should have a show of hands. You people out there send me a card and just tell me how often you can remember to try and even suspend thought. Well, think about it, damn it. Well, how hard are you trying to find the Grail? How hard are you trying to actually reach enlightenment? Well, I think about it a lot. I know you do. Everybody does. Buddha thought about it a lot. 35 years. And then suddenly realized, Jesus H. Christ. Of course, he didn't say a word. I'm just putting that in his mouth. He just went. And he smiled, he scanned, and all thought was suspended. And he was conscious and not thought about it. No thought about being conscious. And then as soon as he thought about it, he went, Jesus H. Christ again. Because he was right back where he was. Let's assume he didn't. And he just kept sitting there. But then sooner or later, there was his 12 trusty compatriots. And they came over the hill and they went, ooh. They finally drew up closer. Of course, he saw them. They realized something had happened. They said, huh? And he realized you can be in Istanbul and you're still tied, like with the world's greatest rubber band, back to that pissery where you started out in downtown Paris. And I just know they're going to say, come on, man, what is it? Come on, you know something. And they're going to make me feel, of course, he had an excuse, like they're going to make me feel kind of obligated to talk to them. And they're going to be, boing! Whatever it is, 2,500 miles, just like that. All the way from Istanbul, just instantly back to Paris. But of course, he was that smart. He's not going to blame it on them. He just then begins to understand even fuller the richness, the blunt, simple complexity of life, because there's his friends, and they're going to stand there. They're going to keep standing. And he's going to keep sitting there, smiling. And finally, they're going to give. At least they will. They're going to have to say, even if it went days, even if they in some way they thought we shouldn't really bother him. Finally, one of them had to go, come on, I can't stand it. What'd you see? What's happened? What have you done? And he knew it was going to happen. So there he sits. If he answers, he's going to have to stare. In other words, he's going to have to think. But it's not like blame it on them. I wanted to say that to get you the idea, because once you see that, it's not blaming on them, because he could have not answered. But that's not really the nature of life. That's not the nature of man. And he knew, well, I'm going to have to think. I'm going to have to. And it's somewhat, again, misleading and dogmatic to say that you're sprung all the way from Istanbul back to Paris. But how about somewhere around the Transylvania, maybe somewhere in, well, western Hungary, what would now be Hungary, back to the edges of France at least. And he realizes, if I speak, some thought is going to start again, because you've got to think to speak. To speak requires thought. It then begins to be like a balancing act, like a juggling act. In the same way that I said that if you actually were inflamed enough, if you were serious enough, out to an extreme, you would not go to movies. I'm talking about living right in this town right now, in this day and time. You would not turn on television, you would not listen to anybody, you wouldn't read, which really sounds extreme and real harsh, and it is. Buddha would have had the same thing in those conditions, that he could have done nothing. It becomes, it's a matter of how bad you want it. How bad did Buddha want to stay in that state? How strong are you that you can fall back out of it and get back in it? But it's not anybody's fault. It's that he sat there, using my example continually, and he knew that those guys were going to ask him. They'd all been through this together. They'd been traveling for years, and they recognized something's happened. They go, come on, you got to tell us. In a sense, he realized, yeah, I do. But it wasn't them. It wasn't anyone's fault. It was just a greater understanding of how life is arranged. They couldn't help themselves asking him. Suspension of thought. Doesn't that sound better than stopping of thought? Well, I'm here to help, to try to comfort people. Everybody can think about that a few days, and maybe I will water it down. No, I won't. You can't water it down any further than the suspension of thought. Unless you've got your own portable Bodhi tree.